Good morning, everyone. Perfect. So we're starting to have a good crowd with us. So we will slowly kick off with today's webinar. And I'll just share my screen. Perfect. So welcome to today's webinar. It's really great to see many of you with us today. Today's webinar is hosted by SPP Denmark. The SPP stands for Sustainable Procurement Pledge. So that will also be the focus for the topic of today, CSDDD. So we'll be looking into how to adapt procurement strategies to meet the requirements of the CSDDD and drive sustainability in the organizations. Our agenda for today will, of course, as we're doing right now, be to introduce the event and also the SPP. And then we'll go into introduction of CSDDD and its implications for companies. After we have two brilliant case companies with us sharing their what they're doing and point of view. And the first one is Novo Nordisk, looking into how to integrate responsible sourcing into procurement for corporate sustainability due diligence. And after we have DLF, who's going to share their approach on CSDDD. We're going to end up with a Q&A session. Perfect. And just a bit of guidelines for today's webinar. Please stay muted throughout the webinar to minimize background noise and so on. However, do consider turning on your camera so we can have a bit of interactions. We can see who's sitting out there. For questions, please use the chat function to submit your questions. And in the end, we're gonna take them up again. Also, I want to share that this webinar is being recorded. And the recording and other relevant materials will be uploaded on the SPP social media platforms after. If you know someone who weren't able to join today, please share with them after. That would be much appreciated. Yeah. And just to share a little bit about the SPP Denmark team. So as I shared before, the SPP stands for Sustainable Procurement Pledge. So the SPP and also the Danish team, we are a bunch of people who are really passionate about sustainable procurement. And in the Danish team, we have Fleur and René, who are two co-chairs. And we have Mihaela, Catherine, Dina, and myself being the rest of the team. If you have comments, questions, or any requests, please do reach out to one of us and we'll get back as soon as possible. Perfect. And just to share a little bit of what you can get out of the SPP community. So there's the possibility to learn more about sustainability, to help build a community, to help drive positive change, to contribute your own ideas. You can grow your network. You can meet other company leaders, of course, Danish, but also we have SPP chapters all around the world. And of course, you can help organize events or bring forward your ideas of events that you would really like to participate in. Perfect. And to start off this webinar today, we have three brilliant speakers with us. First off, we have Line Knudsen, who's the assistant manager at Keepers. She's going to take us through the fundamental of CSDDD. Then from Novo Nordisk, we have Tracy Nielsen, who is the sustainability lead for responsible sourcing and CSDDD. And then we have from DLF, Geraldine Baga, who is the vice president for sustainability and corporate communication. Perfect. So let's kick it off, and I'll give the word to you, Line.
Yes, thank you so much. And hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us today at this webinar about the CSDDD. I have the honor of giving you an introduction to the coming directive. And said, my name is Line, and I work as an assistant manager in Keepers, where I support companies subject to directives under the EU Green Deal to act in accordance with the directives. That could be the EU taxonomy, the CSRD, and in the future, maybe also CSDDD. Let's see if I can change here.
Is it? You need me to help?
Yes, so I tried to go to the next slide, but it
I
doesn't
can
react.
help.
Okay, thank you so much. Yes, so to explain the CSDDD in a nutshell, I have boiled it down to one sentence only, which is companies must perform due diligence in their global chains of activities to address negative environmental and human rights impact and adopt and implement a climate plan. So what we learn here is that companies are going to do the following four things, which I will also elaborate during this presentation. First of all, companies must perform due diligence in their global chains of activities. Therefore, an understanding of these chains of activities is crucial. Also, they need to address the negative impacts, environmental, but particularly also human rights impacts. And finally, they need to adopt and launch a climate plan. I will not go that much into the climate plans during this presentation. Good. So the timeline for the directive is as follows. In 2024, the European Parliament formally adopted the directive, and in 2026, member states have to adopt the directive into national laws. And in 2027, it is entering into force for the first companies. So the implementation will happen in 3 phases that are based on number of employees and also turnover. So from 2027, the directive will oblige the large companies to perform due diligence on the human rights and environmental impacts in their own activities and the activities of their subsidiaries and the activities carried out by their business partners in these companies' activity chains. So that also means that many smaller companies will be indirectly affected by the directive already in 2027. Today we will also hear a presentation from Tracy, working at Novo Nordisk, that will be affected from 2027. And we will also hear from Geraldine, working at DLF, that will be affected in 2029. And they will tell us about how they plan to or have already started the implementation of the directive in their organizations. And although the rules come into effect at different times, the requirements are the same for both of the companies. Yes. So, as mentioned, companies must perform due diligence to handle CSDDD, and that implies the following 6 steps. Firstly, it is about integrating due diligence into their policies and risk management systems, including the adoption of a due diligence policy, which also has to be updated annually. And the due diligence policy must, among other things, include a description of the company's approach to due diligence and a code of conduct. And secondly, companies must identify actual and potential negative impacts that may arise in the company's chains of activities. So that also includes a mapping of own subsidiaries and business partners' activities. And following, companies must prioritize which of the actual and potential negative impacts they will address. The best thing would, of course, be to address all the identified negative impacts at the same time. But if there are identified several, they are expected to start with the most severe negative impacts. So moving to the 4th point. Organizations must also monitor and set targets to prevent and mitigate potential and actual negative impacts, for instance, by implementing an action plan. And the 5th step is that companies must publicly communicate about the company's due diligence efforts, including any potential and actual negative impacts which they have identified. And they also have to communicate about how they have addressed these negative impacts. And finally, companies must also establish and maintain a grievance procedure whereby individuals and organizations can complain to the company if they have valid concerns about actual or potential adverse human rights or environmental impacts. Yes. Oh, sorry. Yeah, there you go. Yes, so companies must perform due diligence in their global supply chains and not in the entire value chain. So that is to map operations and identify general areas where adverse impacts are most likely to occur and also to be most severe. So that is actually referring to step number 2 in the circle on the previous slide. And the term activity chain covers a range of activities performed by the company, as well as the company's business partners in the upstream supplier side and in the downstream customer side. The activity chain includes all supplier side business partners related to the production and the development of the company's products and or services. And it can include everything from designing products, sourcing raw materials for manufacturing, and also delivering of the final product. And on the downstream side, business partners are limited to the distribution, transportation, and storage of the product when this is performed for the company or behalf of the company. So there is a more selective focus on the downstream activities. For instance, the definition does not include the disposal of the products, nor customer side activities related to the customers or to the company's services. Yes. Oh, sorry, went too fast. No. Okay, perfect. This one. Yes, so companies must address the negative impacts by implementing appropriate measures. That is referring to step number 3 from the circle that I showed in the very beginning. And the concept of appropriate measures should be understood as measures that are capable of addressing the negative impacts in a manner that is proportionate to the severity and likelihood of the negative impact. So the appropriate measures will really depend on the specific situation. But for instance, it could involve setting out new requirements in the contracts with suppliers. That could be one way to address negative impacts. But it really depends on the given situation. It's moving a bit too fast. Okay, so the CSDDD is a hard law rather than a soft law. And this also means that if companies violate the rules, be subject to sanctions in the form of compliance orders and fines from the authorities. So it will be the national authorities that will monitor the compliance of the covered companies. And in Denmark, that will be the Danish Business Agency. And a fine would be calculated based on a percentage of the company's worldwide net turnover. And the limit for financial penalty cannot be less than 5% of the company's worldwide net turnover. Good. And finally, I would like to highlight some of the potential challenges and also opportunities that the directive may impose. And I think that you should consider these challenges as something that you can use to prepare yourself for the implementation. So some of the potential challenges may be complexity of supply chain management due to the mapping and the monitoring of the chains of activities. There could also be some implementation costs for some companies if they have to set up new systems for due diligence, and also implementation cost by doing new procedures. Then it could also be a bit challenging for some companies to navigate in the legal landscape, again, depending on their size, their setup, and resources to do the navigation. And then there could also be some operational and organizational challenges because there might be a cultural shift related to this. Maybe some employees will have some new roles, new tasks. Maybe someone would experience a bit of a skills gap, which could impose some challenges. Then there could also be a challenge related to stakeholder engagement, again, depending on the amount of stakeholders that you have, and also your existing collaboration and dialogue with the stakeholder. Finally, technology and data requirements can also be a bit of a challenge depending on your existing system and the data that the system contains. It would be helpful to have a system that is geared to deliver the necessary data. On the other side, there are also some potential opportunities, which could be an enhanced risk management system, because you become more proactive when identifying risk in your organization. There could also be a benefit of reputation and brand value among customers and consumers, investors, and other stakeholders due to your effort and commitment to sustainability. Investor attraction could also be a result due to the two before mentioned points, because your company may become more resilient and therefore more attractive for investors as you address potential negative impacts. Efficiency and innovation might also be an output due to your analysis of your chains of activities and identification of potential negative impacts. Then there could also be a stronger sector collaboration. If, for instance, if you start sharing information and ideas with company in your respective sectors, and if you share ideas about how you work with the CSDDD. And finally, long-term sustainability is also definitely an output as the CSDDD support the incorporation of sustainability into your core business. Yes, thank you so much for your time. And now I will give the word to Tracy from Novo Nordisk.
Thank you very much. I'm just trying to move the slides, I think. Ida, can you help? Yes, good morning. My name is Tracy Nilsson, and I'm the sustainability lead for responsible sourcing at Novo Nordisk. So today I'll be discussing our approach to integrating responsible sourcing into our procurement processes in light of the CSDDD. Our goal, of course, is to integrate these requirements into the procurement processes to ensure compliance by 2027, as we fall under the first category. Novo Nordisk has a vast supplier base, which includes doing business with more than 60,000 very diverse suppliers across more than 160 countries. This diversity adds complexity to ensuring compliance with the CSDDD, as we must navigate different cultural, norms, social challenges, and policies on human rights, labor, and environment. That's why we must start now in preparing ourselves to integrate not only our responsible sourcing, but also our due diligence requirements into our global procurement process. Our responsible sourcing program, it aims to create uniformity across our supplier base regarding our sustainability requirements. It was very important to standardize our program to ensure compliance with the CSDDD, as it not only focuses on human rights and social aspects, but it also ensures that our suppliers adhere to our standards. This allows Novo Nordisk not only to safeguard our operations, but also to show compliance to CSDDD. The uniformity serves also as our license to operate, providing us a structured approach to managing and mitigating risk across our global supply chain. Moreover, as we've also heard with some of the opportunities, it also standardizing our approach also creates long-term value. It also helps us to enhance transparency and accountability that will, in the long term, foster trust and stakeholder dialogue with our consumers, with our investors, and our regulators. It also helps us to drive efficiency and consistency in our procurement processes. By embedding these standards, we not only comply to the regulatory obligations, but it also further cements and supports our long-term sustainability commitments and supports sustainable business growth. To comply with the CSDDD requirements, we've prioritized several actions in 2025. We've really looked at, this is a simplified version than what was presented by Lena, but really making it and operationalizing it for us in 2025. We've looked at the policy and what does that mean? And that will, again, firstly, integrate, as I just mentioned, our responsible sourcing standard as a mandatory requirement across our global value chain. The big heavy lifting and focus for us in 2025 is, of course, the due diligence. Here we'll prioritize not only standardization, but cross-collaboration across Novo Nordisk, transparency, and digitalization to enhance our visibility into our 60,000 suppliers and assist our ability to identify, assess, and mitigate any identified risks promptly. And finally, reporting. Here we will continue to report on our environmental human rights value chain due diligence through our annual reports and the work that is already being carried out under the CSRD. However, we will continue to strengthen the transparency, actions, and accountability in which we are taking over the course of the next 2 years. Due to the constantly growing demands and requirements for greater transparency in global value chains, we have just onboarded a new CSDDD system and tool from reshaping that will allow us to gain a full 60 view into our value chain. This will provide us with automated risk analysis, enabling us to do our due diligence, assessing, managing, prioritizing, and mitigating risks across our value chain. This can be done in a variety of options, which include self-assessment questionnaires, certifications, evidences, industry monitoring, etc. So this will also enable us to get a 360 overview of our value chain, enabling us to have targeted conversations with our procurement teams on any associated risks identified. This will also allow us to come together, acting in a unified approach in how do we best mitigate and or resolve the risk. So trying to summarize. Oh, yes, thank you. Go ahead. Next slide. So really just kind of giving our approach into looking at the CSDDD and the enormity of it. We really took it and looked at all different aspects of the CSDDD requirements. We took an inside view and we conducted an internal sort of gap analysis, looking at what processes, tools, policies, resources, and more that we have today, and what are the gaps to ensure compliance in 2027. It was a very lengthy exercise that I want to say that took the better part of 2024, but it was very valuable in ensuring sort of and understanding the gaps, the necessary time, effort, and resources in order to begin our CSDDD journey and understand what are the key elements, what are the synergies, and who do you need to have on board with you. So summarizing our journey and where we are today, if we move on to the next slide. I cannot emphasize enough, regardless if you are in the 2027, 28, or 29, start now. Really take an inside look. Start with a gap analysis that will allow you to prepare for the deadlines. It is also essential to recognize that the process takes time and resources, as well as establishing clear priorities and responsibilities, because you can't do everything at once. So it really is important to prioritize. Establishing that cross-functional collaboration is key. It is not a standalone exercise in the procurement department or sustainability. It takes resources from across the entire organization. And I can't emphasize enough that transparency and leveraging digitalization will allow you to effectively identify and support you to mitigate risks. So that has been our journey, and we are continuing. We are just on the road in 2025. But yes, I will now pass it over to Geraldine, who will present from DLF, a smaller Danish company that is in phase 3, starting in 2029. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tracy. So now I'm trying my luck to see if I could actually control my slide. Let's see.
Good luck.
Otherwise, I'll help you, Geraldine.
Yeah, let's do it. Okay, one more. So, so I will start with actually a little bit introductions about who is DLF. And why do we need to talk about who is DLF? Mostly because, first of all, I don't think everyone knows who DLF is. And second is, I think our company characteristics might also give you some informations, because you might able to find yourself relate to it better than Novo Nordisk, of course. And Novo Nordisk is a really big company and it's one of a kind. So the experience of what Novo Nordisk represent might actually not something that you can find yourself. And at least for me, I can see, wow, there's a lot of things Tracy can do that I cannot do. And so it might be representing better of yourself, but also it might alternatively representing the experience of your business partner and your supplier. So that's actually my angle of what I'm sharing. We are a Danish company. We are a cooperative company. that is started in 1906. So we are over 100 years old. Globally, we have over 2,000 employees. And we are actually owned by farmers. We're owned by 2,500 farmers in Denmark, which represent to around, give or take, 40 to 50% of our supplier globally in the agriculture side. So this gives another very interesting story: is how do we work with our supplier? Because the supplier that we have is actually also our owner of the company. But this will be we will save this for another webinar when we come to how do you cooperate and engaging with your supplier. So today we will talk about the approach of how DLF will be working with CSDDD. And so, but this structure and this history, of course, tells us the company size and also the complications that we have in our value chain and our governance. So let's see if it works. No, it doesn't. Oh yeah, maybe it works. And so globally, we are, even though we are a 2,000 people company, but we are also represented in all the key continents that most of the global company will operate in the world. We have our headquarters in Denmark, and so also have a large footprint in Europe. And we're also operating in Oceania, so New Zealand and Australia, North America, South America, and a little bit part of the other places in Africa in the world. So what does it mean? It also means that as we executing CSDDD, we also need to navigate and map out our risk globally. We're handling different kind of environmental, culture, national law, and national best practice. So it's not just one continent that we need to handle, and actually we need to look at the global setup as well. Next slide, hopefully come. Yes. And then we also split ourselves into 4 different business areas. So we have forage, and we have turf, and we have vegetable seed. So I actually forgot to mention, we are a seed company. So our company is selling seed and growing seed. So we have many different types of seed that we do. We spread into 4 different areas, as I mentioned. Forage is seed for growing grass for cows, and that could also be seed that's growing turf that we use for a football field or a golf field. So they are very different: vegetable seed and a complementary seed, like sugar beet seed. And so there are 4 different business area, and that also represent actually 4 different business model and value chain. So the partners that involved in this 4 different area, they are also quite different, and the risk is also different. So what does it mean? So I'm trying to give you this background as a company characteristics. So with a 2,000 people company, and we are spreading across the world and splitting into 4 different business areas. So what does it mean for us? I'm hoping you'll come to the next one. Yes. So what does it mean in the framework of CSRD and CSDDD? So first of all, we as a company our size is in the same category as a large company. So we also have a deadline for CSRD in 2025, and our CSDDD deadline is 2029. As Lena has also mentioned, despite that we are a lot smaller than much larger company like Novo Nordisk, but we are actually subjected to exactly the same complex requirements as a Novo Nordisk. Maybe our value chain is a little bit less complex, but the requirements that we need to fulfill and the reporting and also the capacity of understanding the legislation is exactly the same. And what does it also mean for a company like us? We are, of course, a much more slimmer organization. So it's not just an organization, but also on our process and our data infrastructure. So we would have an approach in the past, of course, is on what is needed, and much more need to have basis on our process and data infrastructure. So the feasibility to just adapt to the legislation like CSRD and CSDD is actually much bigger undertaking than a larger organization. So in order for us to meet many of the directive, is actually not just about implementing the directive. Many of the area, it actually means that we need to do some organization development before we can even take the directive into the company. So next. And then, of course, it has a big impact to an organization of our size. And then what did our colleague have said about it? Our colleagues have said, first of all this directive has a lot of alphabet. So CSDDD, CSRD, and then we have EU taxonomy, and then we have TCFD, TNFD. So it's a lot of abbreviations that is very confusing, and it's also very intimidating. And second is, even when we explain to them what is those requirements inside those abbreviation alphabet, but it still requires a lot of interpretation to exactly understand a simple sentence of transition plan, what does it mean? And mapping analysis and risk analysis, what does it actually mean? What do I actually need to do in order to fulfill the requirements? So that interpretation and support from the sustainability team to the full organization and navigating all this legislation is huge. And then the last thing is, they are both motivated by the prospect of working very hands-on on all these requirements, but at the same time, they were also very concerned about the amount of work behind it, and also the need to influence our stakeholder in order to fulfill all these requirements. And as I mentioned, we are a cooperative company. We are working with our farmers, who is both our owner and our supplier. So to have this directive that we need to implement, especially CSDDD, of course, it means quite different model that we need to deploy in order to make it work. So what do we do in DOF to navigate this very concrete and tangible challenge? So let's see what we come. Yes, so if I'm looking at, so what we do, basically, we try to streamline the process. If you look at the classic process of CSRD, you will start with the DMA, double materiality study, and then you will move on to do the IRO management, which is your impact, risk, and opportunity management, and then start to collect data and then manage your metrics. And when you have all your data, then you will start to create your transition plan, basically your action plans, what you're going to do about it, and set a KPI about it. And then, of course, you will take actions and start to monitor your actions for progress. And you will share your result in your annual report. That's the CSRD flow. That is a strict line. And then if you look at the classic CSDDD recommendation, which is also what Lena has just also mentioned in the presentation before. Let's see, it will come. So then you look at the blue arrow. The blue arrow normally start with in the middle, CSDDD Article 8 and 9, that is identify and assess your adverse impact. And then you will move to 10, 11, 12, 14, basically is implementing action, identifying actions, how you can prevent and mitigate the risk and impact that you have noticed. And then you move on to Article 15, is track your implementations. And then you go to 16, is addressing how the impact has been progressing, and then disclose your result. So when we look at the two processes, then we can see that there are actually a lot of similarity between them. So what we do is actually streamline them. If you're looking at start from the first step, when you have identified, assessed your adverse impact, which is at the same time when you're also doing monitoring of your result, those input is not just to feedback to how you set a KPI and transition plan for CSDDD, but it's actually also valuable information for you to bring back to your DMA, because those are concrete due diligence results that you have, you can bring back to your materiality study to evaluate, do they become a new IRO to you? And then when you manage your IRO, you basically also have adjusted those impacts that are coming for your CSDDD. And when you define actions, not just the one that you have set a KPI, but also those that you have identified to be a risk to your organization, also to the society and community. And when you track actions and monitor, then you also monitor the same. So essentially, they are two different directives, but adjusted through one process if you integrate the activity in there. So we see the advantage of doing it this way. First of all, we've removed all the alphabet from our conversations. So we no longer talk to our colleagues about this is requirements from CSRD, this is from CSDDD, but we actually more focus on this is the step of our sustainability process, and this is the activity that we will do. So we are also able to focus our training on what is the purpose of activity instead of training our colleagues on fulfilling the legislation. Which is actually also make the conversation a lot more interesting. And lastly is it also makes the sustainability prioritization process a little bit more dynamic. So our colleagues are not just looking at the DMA results and have a set of data and then become a reporting exercise. But actually now the process become much more dynamic, and they can see that the findings of what we do and the due diligence process is going to fit back into our strategic process and become a new priority potentially. So this is also very helpful for us to do the educations and ensure that we have the right focus. So this is the process that we have sort of created and is looking forward to implement. Is this the best way to do? I generally don't know. I think I know as much as everyone do, and I'm looking forward to share my experience with everyone in a few years. And but this is the starting point where we see that with an organization our size and to navigate all this complex legislation, this is our approach. So thank you for your time, and now back to you, Ida.
Thank you so much, Line, Tracy, and Geraldine, for your really interesting inputs, both, of course, about the CSDDD fundamentals, but also from Novo Nordisk and from DLF. So now it's there's a possibility to ask questions for Line, Tracy, and Geraldine. Just add them to the chat. And I think while we are waiting for questions to come in, I would just like to hear both Tracy and Geraldine with the implementation of our the implementation that's coming with the CSRD, but also that you're now preparing for CSDDD. Is it your experience from your organizations that the conversation have changed around one thing is climate and sustainability, but especially also with CSDDD now with the focus on human rights? Have you experienced that change in the organization? Maybe first off, over to you, Tracy.
Yeah, thanks. So the CSRD, of course, it's incorporating many of the elements that are now front and center of CSDDD, but primarily focusing on the value chain. So I think more the conversation that's being highlighted is more transparency around the value chain, and especially with human rights. Novo Nordisk has, a very established and deep human rights program policy.
And we do have a lot of customers.
Oh, sorry.
So 100%.
I have somebody else that's helping me with the answer. We have quite a robust human rights. However, of course, it always starts with your own operations, and now we are expanding that more robustly into the value chains, right? So I would say changing, yes, significantly. It's not new topics, right? It's just expanding, and as I said, it's more the transparency, the accountability into that, and how then are we going to report out on that? And that comes with digitalization, understanding what are those potential risks that maybe we have not fully seen, but that we will use with the help of the OSAPIENS tool.
Thank you. And Geraldine? Yeah.
So I think from DLF point of view, it definitely changed our approach to specifically human rights. I would say that we will have to change our approach from a more passive to active. Not that we do not have that or we ignore that, but with our company size and also the base of a supplier that we have, we more see that our positions to change is very limited. However, passively, of course, we will be glad that the national legislations requirements is sort of where we are making sure that ourselves and also our supplier and our value chain is aligned with that, and that's what I call we are passively working with this in the past, and now of course the CSDDD is making us to take a more active approach and not just rely on the national regulations to safeguard that, but actually we are actively going to safeguard that. So it will be a huge change in our approach in that sense.
Thank you. And then maybe a question, because and still please do, if you have questions in the chat, put them there. I can see there's some good comments about Tracy, your Novo's use of Sapiens, and it's being recommended, so that's really great. Hopefully a good recommendations for other companies starting off their CSDDD journey. Maybe Line, from a small question to you from your presentation, is that with your experience and talking to other companies, what have the responses that you've gotten, what have been the biggest obstacles for them or the biggest challenges to really get started with the CSDDD? I know you had some main challenges, but maybe just tapping into what have been the reactions from companies.
I think for the most of the companies, it's a bit overwhelming, because a lot of companies are also starting doing their CSRD report. So a main reaction has been, that it is really overwhelming that there are a lot of European legislation about sustainability that they need to sort of implement into their organization, and also, try to decide and organize. So who will take care of these directives? Because the experience is that sometimes it falls in between different departments. So sometimes we experience and meet this concern. And that's what we really try to help organizations with, grasping these directives, and also, implement a good way of structuring their way around so they could work with these directives.
Perfect, thank you. And we have a couple of questions in the chat. The first one I'll direct both towards you, Tracy and Geraldine. It's the question that, have you explored industry initiatives? As we know, for tier N supply chain transparency, IT tools are not enough. Have you looked into to these initiatives?
I can start. Yes, I would say it also spans across this cross collaboration with other team members throughout Novo Nordisk that are very focused on tier N and risks, and of course they have also been looking at different IT tools and information in order to gather. So I'm not the best one to answer fully on behalf of Novo Nordisk, but it is a cross collaboration, and we are looking into it, and it isn't unfortunately at this moment isn't a one size fits all, but I would say there's a lot of development in the area given the complexity of tier N and the required information that is needed as well. So I don't think it's fully there, but it is definitely being developed.
Thank you. And Geraldine, have you started exploring?
Yeah, I think just a very, very simple things to add on this on the TN supply chain transparency. I think that for us it would be very much focused and based on the risk materiality on the area. So so it would not be a full value chain exercise. So in that sense, I think it is correct that IT2 is actually not the most important in these discussions. It is more about the risk assessments of how much different, how many tiers of the supplier that we have, and where do we see the biggest risk geographically or by the sectors, and that's where we focus. So it's much more, I would say, much more direct engagement into the area where we see has a risk instead of a massive statistic tool. Yeah.
Thank you. And a question for you, Tracy. A company as big as Novo Nordisk, how will they make sure that the whole supply chain aligns with the firm's code of conduct and follow the requirements from CSDDD in terms environmental and human rights?
That's a big question. And it's definitely not an easy answer. I mean, it's multifaceted, right? What we need to do from the onset is ensure that we have, first and foremost, robust and comprehensive requirements in which we then take forward into our procurement processes, right? I would say no company can ensure 100%, right? But you need to have at least a solid foundation and to have that supplier engagement that is active to reinforce the Novo Nordisk or any others companies' responsible sourcing requirements. And that also will require, regular dialogues. It could also involve capacity building training programs, sharing the best practices. We do have, as I mentioned, a very extensive supply base. So of course, prioritization is key. Risk identification and mitigation, of course, is key. And then there's also supplement activities such as, again, it could be audits, but you also can't go, deep across that large of a supply chain. So again, this transparency is also critically important. And then, through industry collaboration, partnerships, Novo Nordisk is also part of the PSCI, where we do share and have similar suppliers, right? So it's not a one size fits all. It's not a one company sort of compliance program. We span across, especially in indirect with our suppliers, many, we have to do this together, right? And that's, I would say, also the benefit of CSDDD is how do we collaboratively approach this across global value chains?
Thank you. And we have two questions in the chat, and we'll see if we can do both in the time we have left. First one I also directed to both you, Tracy and Geraldine, and maybe also Lena, if you have some points on this. What are your recommended top 3 immediate actions or investments companies must already be taking or making in the third-party risk management process? Maybe Geraldine, you want to start with from the DLF point of view?
Yeah, I would say that for us, I think it's very difficult to say. It depends on where your company's maturities are. So I think the answer of the three immediate actions for a company of the maturity of Novo and DLF are quite different. So I would only able to speak on the company of our maturity and our size. I would think that first of all, you actually need to bring the organizations to the same level of your understanding. And that's number one. That's very important because you need all the help that you can get in order to start the work. And second is you must be very focused because you were not able to cover absolutely the full value chain. And so the material area is something that you should spend a lot of time on prioritizing. And then I would say again, as the same answer as the previous one, depends on how much that you're able to invest. Of course, the answer is also different. If based on my experience and as I see it, a massive statistic tool or data system that has mentioned it before. It does not really suit for a company of our size. It is a much more effective process for us to focus a specific area that is really mature and high risk, and take actions to engage with your local partner and through your value chain. So that to me is the three things that we would do, because an investment of a very large database would actually delay our process, because to build the infrastructure and data in order to fit the system would have taken longer time for us to engage with them in order to meet the deadlines. Then I would think, yeah, that would be the answer for the company of our size and our maturity.
Thank you. And Tracy, your top three recommendations?
Yeah, I can just briefly add, again, I echo Geraldine, it depends on maturity of your company and where you are on your journey, right? So I think first and foremost, one way investment to start is actually doing a gap analysis, understanding what you currently have internally against the CSDDD requirements. So that investment is spent more on your own internal resources, but I would say it's a very critical element to do, because then that will help you identify potentially what other investments you need, if it is an external data transparency tool, or do you have the means and the capabilities internally. But again, it will require something around transparency for sure.
And Lena, anything to add here about the recommendations for risk management and so on?
No, I think you gave some really good answers here. But there is also a question about how companies ensure full transparency throughout their supply chain, especially when working with suppliers in countries with less stringent regulations and limited access to data. And I would say, yeah, it is a tricky question and a tricky situation, but I would say that, I mean, lack of transparency in itself is a risk, because then you don't know, what is actually going on. So my recommendation would be that start having a dialogue with this supplier, and then based on that, see if you have any concerns, or if you feel that there might be some risks here that you need to, dive into. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And thank you to the three of you. I will round off now. Unfortunately, a lot of time, so no more time for questions. I just want to make a bit of noise for the upcoming SPP event. Well, we have a physical event or breakfast clubs, as some of you may know. So the next one will be on March 14. It will be in Bellerup, where Ambu is hosting us. The focus for the day will be looking at how to advance sustainable procurement. So there'll both be tools and, of course, networking. And then we'll have three brilliant companies who will be a panel and share what they have been doing for 2024 and where they'll take their companies for 2025. So some lessons learned and good recommendations for advancing sustainable procurement. So I really hope to see you there. And you are able to see upcoming events, other knowledge sharing aspects, and different posts on our both. We have a LinkedIn page, but we also have a LinkedIn group, where in the group there will be there's opportunity for more conversations among all our ambassadors. So please go in there, like and stay informed. Thank you so much for everyone coming online and listening to the webinar today, and thank you so much to our three guest speakers today. Thank you. Great.